we seem to be recording. Okay. Hey, members and streamers, it's Fracken here again. So today I decided I would like to do a video for FreeBSD for all of you guys out there that might be trying your hand at FreeBSD. Now myself, I use BSD on pretty much everything. It runs my back end, it runs my front end now, it runs my desktop, it runs my Raspberry Pis, it pretty much runs everything. But one of the issues that I had initially when I set up a Raspberry Pi is I had a clock frequency. If you take a look at my little console app that I wrote up here, you'll notice that my CPU frequency is not 800 megahertz. And anyway, so what happened is I fired that RPi up, and lo and behold, for some reason, the frequency was always stuck at 800 megahertz. Well, I eventually figured out what the problem was, and just to save everybody a whole bunch of time, the problem is I wasn't running PowerD. Now, PowerD is a tool that controls the frequency and the power stuff inside FreeBSD. And there's multiple different modes and such. There's an A mode for when it's plugged in, a B mode for that runs on battery. You can actually determine and set what particular kind of mode it runs on, battery or on line power. But anyway, I thought I would just show you guys what happens when we kill PowerD. So now the recording might get a little janky because I'm using OBS on the exact same machine that I'm going to be doing this on. But anyway, let's just kill PowerD and watch what happens. Look at that, 800 megahertz, and that's where we're stuck at. We can wiggle windows around. It doesn't matter. We can take a look like, we're still running a whole pile of stuff, but it's just not scaling the CPU. So let's go back here and fix this. And we'll do it in real time so you can kind of see how this works. So taking a look at the man page for PowerD, it gives you a whole bunch of different options. So one of the options is, like I said, PowerD-A mode is for setting your line power mode. So let's just try this. So we're going to PowerD-A. Let's take a look at our options again. So maximum, minimum, adaptive, high adaptive. Personally, I use adaptive these days because it's it kind of scales a little bit better to the kind of work that I do. So we'll just use that. And you'll notice immediately we're right back to our maximum boost clock. Now on this particular machine, it's an old T440P. It's got an i7-4910MQ in it, which is a chip that does a boost clock of 3.9 or I don't know, something stupid like that anyway. Very, very hot chip. But anyway, that's what this denotes here. When it's not in boost mode, BSD will report it as something like 2900. When it's in boost mode, whatever the boost clock is, it won't tell you, but it'll just kind of give you a hint by telling you 2901. But anyway, so you don't have to do this by hand. And you'll notice that immediately when I typed that, it immediately went into daemon mode. And if we actually have a look here, we'll probably see it in our list of running stuff. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. Yeah, you see in PowerD in there. But anyway, so what you can also do is in your rc.conf file and /etc/rc.conf, that's where a lot of your configuration settings are configured in FreeBSD for when you boot the machine. And so this here is the settings for PowerD. You'll notice that I'm still booting the machine with high adaptive. And actually what we could do, in fact, even right now, is let's just go back up there and change that because we're not actually doing that anymore. Control O, and we're done. So next time it boots up, it'll be booting up into adaptive mode. But yeah, that's basically the bottom line of it. If you have a FreeBSD machine where the clock rate, even if it just kind of feels sluggish, it might be worth to check and make sure that you've got this set properly, because this is something that is not set out of the box. One thing that you have to understand about FreeBSD is not like Linux, right? FreeBSD does not hold your hand. What you start with is basically you boot into a machine, and when you initially boot into a machine, let's see here, let's get out of here. Basically, this is what you're staring at. You're staring at a console, right? So, even for my machine here, when I boot the machine, it doesn't even boot into a graphical interface. I have to boot into a console and then I start my graphical interface by hand. I use some of the existing start scripts like StartX and whatnot, but a lot of this other stuff I start manually or write scripts to start them. And so as a result, one of the things that you'll have to do is create your own setup for your rc.conf file. Now, as far as figuring out this stuff and how to learn it, just go to freebsd.org and look at the FreeBSD handbook. They've got everything you could possibly ever want to know about this stuff. It's very well written. The other thing I would say is, if you're new to FreeBSD, try and stick with it. BSD is one of those things where you're probably going to break it a few times when you first start. I mean, like, to put this in perspective, like when people watch me use BSD at this point, to them it seems like, I've just always known this stuff, but that's not the case. I started the same place everybody else did, right? My very first experience with BSD, I had never installed it before. I had never used it before. And I had a colo machine back in the 90s at my local ISP that my friend owned. And one day he just gave me the keys and he's like, well, it's up to you now. You do whatever you got to do. And I started about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. He turned off the alarm system, handed me the keys to lock up when I was done. And so I started at 6 in the morning and I wasn't done till about 11 o'clock that night. And that entire day, you got to remember, I didn't have a second machine to be looking stuff up with. I had an optical with BSD on it, and I had a machine. I didn't have use of any other computers. I had no documentation. So it was just smashing my head against it for like 17 hours. Needless to say, I looked a little haggard when my friends picked me up after this was done. But, bottom line is, I got her done. And, that first experience might sound like a horror story, but the truth of the matter is, generally speaking, stuff like that is very instructive and a good lesson. So you tend to remember whatever lessons you learned during experiences like that. And, that might be my first experience with it, but it was definitely not like that the next time. But anyway, that's the bottom line. You guys are stuck at 800 megahertz clock rates on your machine. Fire up PowerD and figure out whatever settings you want to have for your particular install, and either do it by hand, write your own shell scripts to do that stuff, or add the configuration files to rc.conf. And anyway, that's it for now, guys. I hope you guys are having a good one, and we'll catch you next time. GG's and 7 threes.